not late, it's 4 o'clock, right on my watch.
I just walked in the door myself.
Where am I? Did you sit me next to? Yeah, because that's keep me.
No, it's your job to keep me in check.
If Richard can't do that, he's got the hammer. Yeah.
So I heard from no one in terms of, we're not being available, but looking at this, just a couple notes, we do have Amy Muller, Lyle, on Zoom, and I believe that's also Google Big Horse. So, I think that we're ready to go.
Let's call a meeting in order. Let's go ahead and do a roll call first.
Okay, Richard Seiler,
Present.
Joe Mann,
Present.
Dale Robbins, DG Garcia,
Present.
Tim Olson,
Present.
Jim Bonker,
Present.
Paul Brandt.
Present.
Thank you, and I've got Kimball Big Horse on Zoom.
So you can always make no for a roll call. You can hear you.
Oh, that's, yes, Kimball, Big Horse.
Kimball? Well, he's on, but he may be having audio difficulties, okay. So first up is
Okay,
review of the agenda.
Yeah, I don't think we'll take any action on those absent.
Hello, hello. I'm here. Listening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dale's only absent. So we're going to look at the minutes, then ratify our mini storage and our building heights today, and then we'll get some workshops that Lisa, I guess, are you
So I'm
doing
doing,
all three of them or?
no, I'm doing the comp planning code amendment docket, going through that.
Okay.
And then the rest we're gonna turn over to Jim Frank and Mike Tiro for, the privately initiated, items on.
Just a presentation of them.
Yes,
What
yeah,
they're looking at. Okay,
exactly.
then we'll look at the secretary report and then report from the planning commission. Any citizens' comments at the end? I'm still talking, Neil Robinson arrived, so. We're full group now. Let's look at the minutes from March 8th. I was not here. Does anybody have any comments or changes they'd like to see on the March 8th minutes?
Move to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Minutes are approved. Verification of the meetings. So Doug, you want me to go ahead and read those back in again? Because we did before, on criteria for
Absolutely.
conclusions, conclusions is recommendation, right?
You can absolutely do that, yes.
On the first one, which is the, let me make sure I get my paper right here.
RV storage.
RV main storage, just want to make sure I'm on the right pages here. I'm just gonna read the conclusions and the recommendations, this is to allow them in the, freeways commercial zone. The proposed amendment is consistent with comprehensive plan and it's not detrimental to public welfare. The proposed amendment is not warranted by change in economic, technological, or land use conditions. The proposed amendment is not necessary to correct an error. The proposed amendment is not necessary to clarify meaning or intent. The proposed amendment is necessary to provide for proposed use that was not previously addressed. And the proposed amendment is deemed necessary as being in the public interest. And that's the conclusions we came to. then the recommendation in the matter of amendment is for the City of Liberty Lake Development Code to allow recreational vehicle and mini storage as limited use in the C2 freeway commercial zone. The City of Liberty Lake Planning Commission does hereby recommend the City Council that the amendment be approved. Can I get a motion to ratify?
So moved. Second.
All in favor of ratification?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. RV story, RV and mini story. Ratified. And the other. More fingers. Okay, this one is the building height. On the revised information on how to determine building height. Conclusion, the proposed amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and is not detrimental to the public welfare. Proposed amendment is not warranted by a change in economic, technological, or land use conditions. The proposed amendment is not necessary to correct an error. The proposed amendment is necessary to clarify meaning or intent. The proposed amendment is not necessary to provide for a proposed use that was not previously addressed. And the proposed amendment is deemed necessary to be in the public interest. On the recommendation in the matter of the amendment to the City of Liberty Lake Development Code adopting a revised definition of building height and incorporating throughout zoning district regulations, the City of Liberty Lake Planning Commission does hereby recommend to the City Council that the amendment be approved as modified in Exhibit A. I'm not sure what the modification ended up to be.
Oh, so the modification was, we added, the word, we added the word,
Measured from the highest grade
from the height, yeah,
of the front.
highest elevation.
Highest grade of the front elevation.
Okay. On the recommendation and for ratification of the building height definitions, can I get a motion for ratification?
So approved.
Second. All in favor of ratifying the building height changes?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay. Building height ratification.
So it's that time of year again. I apologize that I missed our April meeting when we were gonna talk about this, but other things were going on at that moment. And so I appreciate your bearing with me on that. But we wanna go through our docket for our 2022 annual comprehensive planning code. And so we have several that are in the cities that are city initiated. You heard from Vijay Adams and Jeremy Jenkins regarding the Lakes Water and Sewer District wanting to amend our regulations related to I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Public utility local distribution facilities is a limited use in all zones. We just went through, we wanted to change, currently it says it's a conditional use. We just went through that with an essential public facility, a water tank. It was absolutely necessary. There was a lot of time, effort on the part of water district, time and effort on the part of city staff to go through a conditional use process where it was clearly warranted and allowed. And we're proposing instead that we can achieve the same things, consider the same issues by treating it as a limited use and providing design standards. So that is one of the city initiated proposed amendments. It's an efficiency thing. If we need a water tank, we need a water tank, and that's legacy. So the question is, can we come up, much like we did with RV and mini storage, come up with some reasonable design standards that can protect the community's interest in that regard? And so that's the basis for that.
So it's centric around just water tanks or other things.
Public utility, local distribution, so that's true of any, public utility distributor. We need a lift station, we need a lift station. You know, so,
So we'll tackle all those.
yes, but it's specific to distribution facilities. The next one is Clearview Triangle and Vision Clearance, and what what we have in city code and engineering design standards is in conflict. And at the end of the day, we reference the standard for, the standard for Clearview triangles, I'm sorry, I can't write those days. Anyhow, long story short, we would like to be specific. We have a specific standard that we use for local roads and intersecting local roads and driveways. We also have a standard for collectors material intersections, and the Clearview triangle is there. And by simplifying it, it makes it easier for everyone, and it affects a whole lot of things that we do in commercial site plans, in subdivision reviews. And more than anything else, it generally relates to things like signs and landscaping. And you want to always make sure that you're taking that. So we're proposing to clean that up, make it consistent in both, number one, but number two, also simplify our reference. Now, the fencing standards for essential public facilities, that was the conversation that we had with IJ and Jeremy Jenkins related to secure essential public facilities like wells, etc. And the requirement from a public safety perspective to be able to control access. Right now, our code does not allow for barbed wire on top of fences. We can do electric fences, but we can do electrified fences, but we don't allow barbed wire. So that was the request of Sewer Water District, and they went into it with several of theirs. We've come up with creative ways to try and deal with that, but it is expensive. So that is something that they're asking to be at least given consideration.
Hey, Lisa, is your microphone on? Yeah, I can hear you sort of.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah.
I guess I have to lean into it, which is hard to do when I'm trying to also voice it.
I don't want to inconvenience you, that's okay.
No, it's all good, it's all good, it needs to be on the recording.
Yeah.
So the next one that we have on our docket is special seasonal and community event regulations. And these are a mess. These are a mess, they were a mess from the beginning, there's inconsistencies. We just want to clean it up, streamline it, simplify it. And how we do it and what the code says is convoluted at best. And because there's all this community events, temporary uses, there's this, that, and the other. I'm not even sure how the prior administration administered this, but I do know that we're finding it very troublesome to try to make this work. And in a community where we place a lot of value on community events and community engagement, it shouldn't be that bureaucratic. So we're trying to get to a place where we can do what we need to do to protect public safety and interest and make sure that emergency services are aware, etc. We added, as some people recall, we added food truck regulations a while back, but we had already incorporated them in community events. So if it's a community event, that's kind of handled differently, and that's kind of awkward also. We think that we have a way to really streamline this and make it simpler and easier to address. And the last one is engineering design standards. These, our engineering design standards were adopted back in 2017, and they were taken significantly from City of Chenes, which is a similar small city, but it has a much more rural feel to it, number one. So there's some things in there. We have been taking notes. There are some inconsistencies between development code and engineering standards that we want to tighten up. There are some things that we clearly need to clean up in there. We would like to add some more specific standards as it relates to the just a standard drawing, just because it makes it simpler for the development community. So there's a variety of different things that we need. Most importantly, we need to kind of just tighten it up and make sure it's consistent between the building code and engineering design standards. The last thing that we want to do is, with that is as part of the ordinance, we want to make it clear that standards are something that can be updated by resolution, not by ordinance. This was originally adopted as an ordinance, which means that any changes, we have to go through that whole painful ordinance process. The concept of standards is that standards kind of evolve over time as issues arise, et cetera. And typically, in most communities, standards are something that can be amended by resolution of the elected officials. So it's not that we're trying to take that decision-making power away from them, to streamline the process a little bit. So those are the city-initiated docket items. And then we also have 2 privately initiated docket items. The first being River District Open Space Comp Plan and Zone Change Meeting workshops on this a little bit later. And the second, River District Landscaping and Code Amendments. Now, I wanted to talk also, on our docket, we always look at things that maybe aren't on the docket because they're heavier lifts, bigger projects. And we have a couple that I want to make you aware of. And I want to talk a little bit about them and how they might factor into what we are doing with this. And so first, with our amendments and with the upcoming periodic comprehensive plan updates. So the sign code amendments have been on our radar for a while, and I think most people don't like our sign ordinance very much. We've had conversations, we know it desperately needs to be updated, and we also know that we really need to address the issue of content neutrality. And while Amy and I both have quite a bit of experience in updating sign codes to address content neutrality and meet constitutional, pass constitutional muster, as it were. Problem is that with our capacity right now, we are so busy that, and sign codes are a heavy lift. And by the way, when you check all the boxes related to the constitutional requirements and content neutrality, what we're probably going to end up with, and I've done this, I think I've done 5 or 6 of these now, and Amy's done a couple herself. And I can tell you that in almost every circumstance, what you end up with that meets those standards is not necessarily anything in any village particularly active, but it meets the Constitution.
Content neutrality for me.
Yeah, so content neutrality, the simplest way to describe it is that content neutrality means that if you have to read the sign to know how it's regulated, that it's not content neutral. And there are some things that don't classify. So commercial signage, you can still put controls on off-premise commercial signage, and there's case law that supports that. But things like having different standards for political signs or real estate signs or different timeframes and different whatever, isn't justified based on the basis of the aesthetics, is the only basis we can. Aesthetics and traffic safety are the only basis that you can regulate signs because of the speech component. And depending upon whether it's commercial or whether it's like a governmental public safety kind of issue, a little bit more latitude. Again, off-premise commercial signs are their own category. But at the end of the day, you have to come up with sign standards that allow for real estate signs and allow for political signs, but aren't necessarily different based upon the content of the signs. And as I'm explaining that to you, now you see why nobody likes what you end up with. Because at the end of the day, you've got to come up with something that is just that one size fits all. except one size doesn't fit all. But, again, so there's ways to do it, and as I said, I'm versed in it, and Amy's versed in it. But our capacity with, right now, we're in a kind of a peak development, season where, I mean, we've got a lot going on. The development, or the building code is about to change as of July 1st. So we have just a lot of, commercial projects trying to get in under the wire, some residential, but a lot of commercial that are trying to get in advance of the code change and get vested under the code.
Lisa, can I just ask that when you bring the sign code to us, I mean, I think it's, I'm glad that Paul asked the question, I'm glad that you were able to answer it, I still don't know what we're talking about. I'm just wondering if we could bring examples to what,
Absolutely, that's why it's such
what
a
we're
big,
trying to fix, what's broken and what we're trying to fix.
that's a big part of it, but anyhow, long story short is it's a huge lift.
I understand, okay.
Okay, and the huge lift, what I want to suggest to you is it's something we have to fix. I think that, we're, believe it or not, we're already starting to look at budget season this year, and so I'm gonna be recommending to the mayor that we include, and the mayor and city council, that we're including some money in, the capital facilities plan for actually the sign code amendment, because we just don't have the depth to put it in the current development environment. And we're just limited. And so that's number one. Number two, and this is one that's timing that I want you to be aware of, that we really have to, we have a periodic comprehensive plan update that has to be adopted by June 30th of 2026. In 2024, we actually got some grant money for it, but, and we've talked about this before as it relates to housing and whatnot. There's some pretty big lifts, there's some new regulations and some pretty big lifts in this. And we'll get some grant money to help us with components of it, but that's also a big lift. One of the things that we need to do early, and I suggest that we start this year, is as part of the process, we need to adopt a public participation plan for this comprehensive plan update. And I think there's a great opportunity for us to maybe either partner with the Community Engagement Commission to try and come up with a really robust, not the typical, oh, we'll have a town hall meeting kind of thing, and we'll put it out there on Zoom. Do a good job with this, and that'll lay the foundation for the rest of the periodic comprehensive plan update. But that's something that I think we need to get started this year, and that's something we have to adopt early. The other issue is we had on here copying the SAPs for River District and Liberty Village into the development code, and that is still a goal. It is still a big lift. Again, we can deal with those SAPs as overlay districts and deal with the differences in their standards through overlays. But much of the, all of chapter 4, which is really about the processes and permitting standards, that's all 100% the same, regardless of which district you're in. The chapter 1 administration, other than some flowery language in the purpose statement, is exactly the same. Definitions are the same, everything. And most, some, not all of the development standards are the same. I mean, districts, there's different zoning district regulations. It's easy to deal with them as different separate districts. So instead of being, what we call it now, RDR, instead of R1, or is actually R2. You know, so we do have different districts that we can put in our chapters too and whatnot. More than anything, it's just a matter of time and a matter of station to get there. And so I think that that is important. That may be one that really probably ends up happening with the code amendments that we do after the periodic comprehensive plan update. And one of the things that I have to say is that we may be looking at some, it depends on how the process goes and what we come up with some of the policies related to housing, some of the things that we have to address. But I dare say that we're going to have quite a few development code amendments following the adoption of that comprehensive plan. So that may be the time at which we really want to get these SAPs modified. But the sign code is one that has been on our work program since actually pre-COVID. And it's one that we know that we need to address. And so I think that is one that we need to move up on. And as I said, even I have the background and capacity to try and manage a consultant doing it, but we don't have the bandwidth to actually do the code amendments ourselves. And it is a lot of visualization that needs to go into this process. And so it's not a quick or simple solution. And I know that we also had one other item on there that we had talked about, that we haven't even begun to really think about, other than just to acknowledge that our architectural design standards are kind of dated. And so the fact that we want to update those, whether or not we can get to those while we're doing the periodic comprehensive plan update, or whether or not we can do some visual surveying and come up with these as part of those code amendments, kind of remains to be seen. And it really, a lot depends on what happens with staffing levels in my department and what happens with development, because right now, we have, since I've been here, when I started, we were at a higher level of development in terms of workers than had ever been before, and it has steadily increased each and every year. And our staffing has not necessarily expanded to address that. So that is absolutely one of the things that we have to consider when we look at the planning commission work program, is what the overall work program is. And to the extent that some or others of these have to be are of higher priority to planning commission, that's where I'm looking for feedback from all of you in terms of whether or not we need to get a consultant on board to look at some of our long range updates. So that's certainly something for you guys to think about. And I'm gonna put a pin in that and just ask you to think about it. Right now, it's a conversation I want to have again with you, maybe at our next meeting, because yes, we're already looking at these things. It's 'tis the season, so I'd like you to think about that in your priorities. But next slide. So I wanted to also share with you, and I wanted to share with you kind of where we've been at in terms of the volume of what we're doing. But I also want to share with you, because Greenstone has proposed a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change. That is a type 4 project. We went through this with MTC zone change. And it requires a hearing before planning commission as it relates to the comp plan, development code pieces of it, right? But it requires a hearing before the hearing examiner for the quasi judicial, which is really the zoning. And then there's a hearing before city council. Now, the code does allow for us with a type 4 action to let that span into next year. But the problem with that is, because we're in this comp plan cycle, and we're really going to be starting our comp plan updates next year in real earnest, and it's going to be very heavy this cycle because of all the legislative changes. We don't want that to happen. We just can't afford the time to do that. And so we looked at the schedule, we've come up with a schedule. I know it's a pretty aggressive schedule, but so we've got the River District SAP updates that we're workshopping today with Jim and Mike. We have public utility distribution facility as a limited use in June, along with fencing standards for the essential public facilities and community events use. In July, we want to workshop the engineering design standards and the Clearview Triangle, which kind of goes hand in hand with that. And also, and I think we're going to need to have another workshop on River District SAPs, and at that point, we'll be ready to have some staff analysis to go with that. In August, we'll reserve August for any additional workshops that we need to have with the schedule that we have planning commission public hearing in September. That allows you to ratify your findings and recommendations, and allows for us to get on the hearing examiner's hearing schedule. that we would then do a workshop in November with city council, and if we're lucky and we have the hearing examiner decision, we can actually do the public hearing before city council and, the first read ordinance in December. That, again, the intent, one of the things that's really challenging, we ran into this last time with MTC, is we had such a change in our council that to have part of it happening one year and the rest of it happening another year, very problematic. So that's the other reason why I really want to jam on this, to try and make sure that we can get through. So if we can get through even sooner with our comp plan amendments, so that it's the same city council that's hearing the workshop is actually having hearings and voting on the ordinance, that would be obviously a super desirable thing. Anyhow, I wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to, the last kind of comment that I have, and I really want to go back to, we have no choice on privately initiated docket items. Those are, they put their money on the arrowhead, they get to go forward. The question is, if any of these, if looking at that work program, if I scared you, I didn't mean to. But looking at that work program and looking at schedule, if there's any of these that you feel like, could wait for a year, or if you want to move forward with the docket as opposed to the 7 items that I identified. It doesn't necessarily deal with the long range, I just wanted y'all to know that we haven't forgotten about those. Thoughts?
I mean, as always, just tackle them.
We'll tackle them, and we can still do, because there, all of these city-initiated docket items are still, they're just development code issues, they're not comp plan issues. We could still peel these off into next year if we needed to, if we didn't feel like we were ready, or if we were coming up short. I want to make sure that we get through the River District with privately initiated ones. I want to make sure that we get through the privately initiated ones with the same council that's going to hear the earlier parts of this process.
I think things like the seasonal community event regulations, if we don't get that change until November, we're not gonna be using it until next spring. You know, those types of things are not gonna tackle before the event season starts next year, so.
Except that the dysfunctionality of what we have right now is affecting everyone, so that is actually one that we might, if I thought that we could have the time to do it, we'd peel it off and have that as an early ordinance. But I'm just not sure that we have the time, given the other things going on. That is one that is right now just a bear, because it's not well written. It's not a well-written ordinance, and it makes it difficult for us to administer. It makes it difficult for people who are trying to have events to deal with that. And so we're trying to get something in place. That's where that's coming from.
Where's that on the schedule?
We're actually workshopping that.
No, I know the workshop, but where's the rest?
So
Public hearing is expected.
all of them are, that we would bring them all forward together, only because I'm not sure where in the schedule, where in the schedule we have time to have another public hearing, unless we were to drop something off this.
So we're not going to be able to get to that to help for this, what I'm going to call the seasonal event period.
Well, so what we're trying to do is come up with some interim fixes, that maybe are consistent with what's been done in the past, or trying kind of, but so we want some input at least from this commission, which is why we have it on the next meeting, because we're gonna try and come up with some interim rules, even if it's not the plan where it's changed.
Yeah, if it's something we come up with it, well, so.
So I appreciate that. Anybody else? Thoughts? I mean, generally speaking, what happens with the docket is you adopt it, and as you know, last year's a great example where we had 2 items that weren't ready for prime time and we killed them off. So we just finished it up, at the beginning of this year. We can do that. The question is, do you feel like that's it? And I want to go back to the list because I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this. If this is more than what you want to bite off this year.
I hear the urgency in your voice, and I see the schedule and how it looks, and I just want to offer that if we have to do a special meeting to address some of these things, I mean, we can change that calendar.
Well, and that was my thinking is, and this is gonna be heresy, I know, but maybe we should twice a month.
Until we,
I'm not opposed to
you
that.
could absolutely do that.
Well, I think it's a big, it's a big lift on your staff. And, I think from the committee's perspective, I mean, we'll accommodate, when you're ready to go,
So,
we'll go.
So when we think of the thought of calling a meeting when Lisa's got staff work done for us. Is that fair?
That's absolutely.
It gives,
I mean, well, she has to anyway for public meetings, so.
yeah.
And I know meeting more often puts more work on you guys too, because preparing for these is not simple. And I get that, but it's something that I think we could, if everyone was agreed, we could certainly do to help get through all of this more quickly.
So here's the great example. The great example is exactly the community events. If we can get something, together quicker, we could maybe do a special meeting for public hearing. So we could move that forward to city council and just get that fixed in place.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying, that we want to get this done before the election occurs, because who knows?
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Well, and again, that was really, really challenging at TC because, so we didn't have the hearing examiner's decision in time and we had the council, so we kind of had to really workshop it again with them. And just bring them up to speed and whatnot, so that's.
Just bogs things down.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's on the table is really, if staff is ready to have us get together, that's, and,
Do we need a
special.
I would like a motion in a second for, and
So what
for
I'd
the
like to do is
adoption
make
of
a motion that in addition to a regular monthly meeting, that we are willing to, again, heard your request. Unless you think we need something ongoing on the calendar twice a month, but I think it has in places.
We can do that, and what would happen is if we thought that we were ready for a special meeting.
Right.
Even if I was gonna do a hearing, I got notice requirements, I had to meet, et cetera. But we could talk about it at that meeting, so maybe this meeting or following the next meeting, we might want to have a special meeting.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, is rather than, in trying to give your staff the flexibility, rather than saying you have to be ready on the second and fourth, we simply hold our regular schedule and then agree to meet as requested and to facilitate these objectives.
And that is very much appreciated.
That's the.
How much notice do you have to give?
So, I actually, because of it only has to be 10-day notice,
Okay.
but because we have to put our notice in this, the Spokane Valley News Herald. The cutoff is on a Tuesday to publish on a Friday, so we really do need to give a full 2 weeks.
Okay, so
So
that works. I mean, for us to have 2 weeks notice,
Yeah,
we'll work
that's
around that.
plenty.
And that sounds like a great motion that Paula made. Which I second.
So with that motion, are we also accepting the docket as it's written?
Yes.
Please note that that was a great motion.
Paul and Joe seconded Paul's great motion. In the minutes.
All in favor of,
Aye.
I'm gonna say it the way I see it, is one, accept the docket as it's written, and have the leeway to have special meetings with us when requested by Lisa and staff.
That's
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
It's not as good as mine, but it's.
The motion passes.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
I just wanted to summarize it, so.
So if you'll forgive me, I gotta get out of this for a second.
I have to stop the share and then I have to pull up something else. Here. And next on the agenda, we have sorry. So next on the agenda, we have River District, ozone, open space zone that, Jim is, going to present to us.
Members of the Plan Commission, the chairman of the Plan Commission, we appreciate the opportunity to be
I
here.
think the,
Can you press the button? I think.
Let's see. That one?
Yeah.
Mike should come on.
Is that better? Yeah.
You have a green light, Jim?
Is it that button?
Yeah.
You just kind of hold it.
Oh, here it is.
Oh, that's better.
Green light, came in.
Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you today to talk about this. This is something that's pretty exciting for us, really. The open space, parks, trail system, walkable nature of River District is really the fundamental vision that we have there. And we're here to propose to you that there be an open space designation for those spaces. Currently, all of the open space park areas are zoned with the underlying zone that happens to be there. So some of it's RDR, which is residential zone. Some of it is RDM, which is a mixed use zone, and so forth. So we have a lot of open space in the project, and you can see on that slide that this is the, kind of magnitude of the open space that exists in the project, and it's really a very key part of our vision. So what we're looking to do is have those over time, have all of the park and open space areas converted from a residential or a mixed use zone to an open space zone. And then that allows better protection for those open space areas. And it allows us to have specific development standards for the open space areas that are different from the development standards that are in the residential zone or the commercial zone. Those development standards are really not very appropriate for open space uses, so it allows us to tailor the development standards around open space uses. So currently, we're proposing 4 major areas that would be included in the zone. But over time, these are all properties that are currently owned by the homeowners association. And the homeowners association is at a point in River District where it's being turned over to the residents there. So there's enough residents, there's enough been developed there that the residents control the homeowners association now. And so we're trying to put all of this in place so that that homeowners association will have an effective system of managing open space areas. So this is just a list of the parcels that would be included in the open space area, the open space zone. And so I've got a little graphic for each one of them. So this is Half Moon Park. Half Moon Park is currently zoned RD residential. That means it's zoned for single family houses and apartments. And so this would be converted to an open space zone. And then the next one is the community farm area. And this is currently zoned residential as well. And so that would be converted to an open space zone. And then the next one is River Rock Park. And that park is also zoned residential. And so that would go to an open space zone. And then the final one here is a park that we have we're doing design work on now. It's a park that will be around the trailhead parking at Harvard Road. So we're basically expanding that trailhead, finishing that trailhead off, and then putting a playground and some open space areas in there. So that we're calling that, it'll be I'm not sure the name will be Trailhead Park because we'd like to have a Native American name around it, but that's the fourth area. And a lot of that trailhead is currently owned by the River District developer. So that needs to be, as part of this, the title will be transferred to, some of it may be transferred to the city, the actual trailhead parking may be transferred to the city, the rest of it will be transferred to the homeowners association. So trying to get that put up. As time goes on, there will be other parks developed that are still the land is still owned by the developer, but they haven't been finally developed yet. And we would look over the years to, as those areas are developed and finished and completed and turned over to the homeowners association, we'd make some subsequent requests that those areas be rezoned from whatever their underlying zoning is to open space zone over time. We just don't know the exact boundaries of those future parcels yet, so we can't rezone them right now. So that's a little bit of the reason why we're doing this. And those are the parcels of land that are involved. And so we're looking to, along with the zoning, then we have to develop some development regulations consistent with that zone. So every zone has its own set of development regulations. And so we're working on development regulations and included in the packet. And I'm just going to summarize some of them here because they're, some of them get kind of detailed. And I'm expecting that that this is kind of an introduction to the subject. And over time, I'm expecting that we'll work with the staff to take a look at those, maybe fine tune some of those based on input from the staff and input from the Plan Commission, to make sure that we've got something that everybody's comfortable with. But one of the key aspects of this, and I think an issue, and I think that Lisa's alluded to this, the rules around community events are not very clear. And for us, community events are an essential kind of aspect of what's happening in the River District. You're creating a community that's walkable, that is a little bit higher density. Not everybody has a huge yard. Not everybody has a lot of open space in their own yard, so you rely more on the open space that's in the community. And you can see along Indiana, for example, we're developing some townhouses and some small apartments along with the single family homes. And so building that social fabric in the community is really important. And we had the planning director of the city of Vancouver, BC, come in to do a peer review of some of the work that we're doing a couple of years ago. And one of the things that he said to me that really has really stuck with me is that you have to do more than permit what you want to happen. You have to encourage it. And so that's what we're really trying to do here, is encourage community activities. And some of the existing regulations, because of the complexity of them, and part of it is really the development code that Liberty Lake has is essentially a suburban development code, because most of the development that's happened in Liberty Lake up to this point in time in history of that code is really suburban. And it's things like regular shopping centers, for example, and apartments that are in one area and houses that are in another area. And you don't have the mix, you don't have the more finely mixed uses that that you're seeing in the River District don't really exist so much on the south side. And so we're trying to have development regulations that are more intentional and more in line with more of an urban character that we're trying to develop there. And we're trying to encourage these community events. So some things we're trying to clarify that a lot of these community events are permitted uses and don't require a temporary permit. And so the code requires a permit for temporary uses. But I think what we're trying to clarify here is that if you have an event in a park, it's not a temporary use. It's actually the primary use for which the park was created. So if you have, let's just say you have a small little block party and you want to have it at one of the parks, that's a permitted use in that park, and you're not required to get a permit for it. If you wanted to have a neighborhood orientation, which we do, and one of those little flyers there was a little orientation that we have for new residents. So we invite new residents to come down to the park, and there might be 15 or 20 of them. And we're saying, hey, we're introducing you to the neighborhood, providing an opportunity for you to meet your friends and that kind of thing. Well, that's a primary use for that open space. It's not a temporary use that would require a permit, it's a primary use. And there's some confusion around that now. And we've had a couple of events that there was confusion between us and the staff about, well, does this need a permit or not? And you can't require people to have permits for these little events because it would discourage them. And we want to encourage them. So for that reason, we've made it clear that those small events are the kinds of things you're seeing on the picture there are permitted uses. And I want to just give you another example of that. If you run a reception facility, like for example, let's just say that Beacon Hill is an example. Beacon Hill is a reception facility. So if they're going to have a reception there, that's not a temporary use. That's the purpose for which the facility is there. So every time they have a reception at Beacon Hill, whether it's a wedding or a 50th birthday party or whatever it is, they don't get a permit for every event they have, because that's the purpose for which that facility was created. And we feel the same way about these parks and open spaces. The reason that they're there is so these kinds of activities can take place. They're the primary use of the property. They aren't a secondary or temporary use of the property. And then we clarified the kind of uses that are permitted in the open space zone. The kind of activities that can take place in the open space zone, just like in a residential zone, there's certain kinds of uses that are permitted. There's certain kind of permitted uses that are allowed in the residential zone, and in the open space zone, a lot of uses are not permitted. And then we've set some dimensional and setback standards and site coverage standards, those kinds of things. And the building height standards, for example, are in the residential zones are 45 feet. And we've set a building height in the residential, in the open space zone of 25 feet. So we don't want to have buildings that are 45 feet tall in an open space zone. And it's the same thing with site coverage. The site coverage, you can maybe get 50% site coverage or something in a residential zone, but we don't want that kind of site coverage. Site coverage is how much of the space can be taken up by buildings. So we have a very low site coverage in the open space zones and so forth. So there's some standards that are there. And then we've identified the kind of structures that can take place in the open space zones. And so not only the height and the size of those structures, but the kind of structures that can be located there. And I do want to call attention to the fact that we have allowed a shipping container structure as a permitted structure in the open space zone. And the reason for that is because they are inexpensive and they allow you to have storage uses in structures that are less expensive. And they are of the size and scale that we think are appropriate for that zone. You can get a shipping container for under $10,000. But if you tried to build a structure the size of a shipping container, you might spend $10,000 just for the architecture work on it and the permitting of it. And so you could easily spend $150,000 or $200,000 on a structure, a wooden structure of some kind. And some of these open space areas, you need to have storage for tables and chairs, for sound equipment. At Kendall Yards, for example, we have a shipping container in the Nest Plaza. It holds the chairs and tables that are used in the plaza. It holds the sound equipment that we use there in that building. We're planning a little park that's part of the town center. It's not zoned yet to this zone, but we hope to add it. And that's going to have a little performance venue there. And so we very well might have a shipping container there that would enable us to store the equipment and stuff that's necessary. And in the garden area, we have a shipping container that's used to store some of the equipment and that sort of thing. And that container right now is not permitted in the existing zone, so that's permitted by a temporary use permit. And we have a temporary use permit on that for 1 year, but we want that kind of thing to be a permanent type use. So those are a brief description of some of the development regulations that would be included in the RO zone. And so as I say on the, we're really trying to encourage, have regulations that encourage community use and community gathering in these spaces, and have the facilities there that are necessary to support that. So I might stop at that point and ask if there's any questions about the zone. The next thing I was going to go into were some of the development code regulations related to the signage and landscaping. And I'm going to say a few words and Mike's going to follow up on that. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the open space zone in River Districts, or the RDO zone for the River District. Happy to answer any questions about that.
Yeah, just a quick question. So what's proposed, is this what you're proposing here? Was this a standard adopted from someplace else? Where did this all come from?
No, this is part of his, these are his application materials.
Okay,
So the red lines were proposed by Greensville.
I'm sorry,
The red lines were proposed by Greensville.
but everything else is standard Liberty Lake.
Again, this is, what they're showing in there, are amendments to what's in the Liberty Lake.
Okay, that was my question. Okay.
What's in, and actually it's River District regulations,
Got it.
because they have their own separate.
So, got it. Okay.
Hi. I'm worried a little bit about changing all of those areas into open space zones. In particular, being good neighbors to those who would move into the areas that may have an apartment to be more affordable housing. And I think the River District probably would be complemented by adding a little more of that, more affordable. In opening all those areas, it's almost, not saying it's purposeful, but it's like exclusionary. It's making it open space for the people who are there and to come and gather and enjoy themselves. But our fair share, which we should be doing regionally, I believe, especially with the housing crisis that we have, is to perhaps may not go as far as opening all of those to open zones with parks and those, doing a few, but including a little more affordable housing, especially in that area where there's very limited affordable, based on the cultural climate that we have, the financial climate that's coming, that's on top of us right now. I just think that, it would be best to perhaps have a few, but to dedicate at least, one of those areas to its original residential apartments or, townhomes or duplexes as being discussed throughout the nation. It doesn't have to look like where I live, the villas, which is, an abundance of housing. But, we certainly could add a complement of affordable, where it doesn't have to, you know, people look at affordable and they take it to the lowest level, they don't want it. But I know you as a builder, developer, you have some outstanding, I mean, the projects are beautiful. And I believe a project that, will complement that area without it being an open zone throughout it's more pleasing and more welcoming to Liberty Lake. As a regional partner and doing our fair share in opening it up to a few more areas of affordable.
So the general commitment to affordable housing, and fair share and so forth is something that is very, near to us.
Yes.
And we try to design a wide range of product. For example, in the River District, you see some small cottages. Those cottages are only 1,100 to 1,300 square feet. Some of them only have 2 bedroom, 1 bath. Some of them are 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, but they're small homes. We're doing a lot of townhouses, and you can see across from the park and along Indiana. We're doing a lot of townhouses. No, townhouses are small. They range a little bit, you know, there's a range of things in there, but they're as small as 1,200 square feet. The apartments that you see, not only the little complex that's by the traffic circle and across from the junior middle school. I'm old, so I like mix up junior high and middle school. But you'll see on Post Harvest Parkway in Indiana that we've done some small apartment buildings. And those units are as small as 700 square feet for a one bedroom unit and 1,000 square feet for a 2 bedroom, 2 bath unit. So those are very small units, and they're the kind of units that can be affordable. Now, up to this point in time, we haven't been able to do condominiums, but there's been changes in the recent statutes at the last legislative session that have removed a lot of the restrictions on condominium development for buildings that are 12 units or smaller and two stories or smaller. And so those various buildings that you see there, we intend on building those as condominiums. And so, or similar product. We have other product that we're developing to try to find ways to make homes smaller and more affordable. And honestly, the only real way to make homes more affordable is to make them smaller and increase density. I mean, that's all there really is. You have to do one of those two things. And so a lot of that is incorporated into the plan, and the RDR residential zone allows us to mix all of those different product types all in that zone. And so that's why you're seeing that great mix of uses. And you don't see that on the south side of the freeway. You see neighborhoods that are almost all exclusively single family houses. You can go to the gardens or the estates or, you know, wherever, and you'll see almost exclusively single family homes on relatively large lots. You start to see some townhouses and cottages, some of the later stuff that we did in Rocky Hill along Country Vista. You see small cottages and a lot of townhouses there. And you see some townhouses on Mission during the first phase of River District, but we're doing much more now than we did then. So we have a real commitment to do that kind of product that you're talking about and mix it into the community. But there has to be some open space because those units don't have a big yard. So when you have a single family home, you've got a big yard in the back. So if you've got a couple of kids, they can play in the backyard. But if you live in a townhouse, there's no backyard to play in. So you have to, open space becomes even more important as the density in the community increases. You have to have open space available for people to use because they don't have it in their yard. And so the open spaces that we're talking about rezoning here are already parks, already developed as parks. So whether it's, well, first of all, the open space along the power line is mostly in a power line easement, and so you can't build there anyway. And Half Moon Park is a park.
It's a park currently.
It's currently a park, but the chances of that ever being redeveloped into housing are nil. I mean, the community would never accept that. And we think it shouldn't. We think it should remain a park. Because as we develop more density, we need places for people to recreate and gather. And because they're not necessarily going to have the same kind of space that someone that lives in the gardens, for example, over here, has a big front yard, a big backyard, they have plenty of room. But that's not true of some of the smaller houses that we're building. We have a lot of land there to build affordable housing, and we are doing it. And in addition to that, and something that we really don't want to publicize, is that we have a program that we call Greenstone New Beginning Homes. And we have homes in River District that we've moved families into that make less than 50% of median income. And they could never afford to buy that house at market rate. But we move them in there for a year or so on a rental basis so that they can fix their financing, they can prepare themselves for home ownership, go through home ownership training. And then we sell that house to them at a price that they can afford based on 30% of their income. And then we put a covenant on that house, we put a covenant on it so that that house, when it's resold, has to be sold to another person that makes 80% of median income or less. So that keeps that house affordable permanently. It keeps it available for a low-income family or median-income family permanently. So these are all the things that we're working on, because I agree with what you're saying 100%. But the answer isn't to convert existing park and open spaces to houses.
True, I understand that. But one of the zones is zoned already for apartments.
Pardon me?
Isn't it true? One of the zones is already zoned for apartments?
They're all zoned that way.
Okay, well, they're,
They're zoned that way because there is no zone for open space.
correct. And so my own thing was, because I feel you agree as well, and I like the idea that you already implemented in your area. But, because it's zoned that way, but it's currently open space, that may be considered as part of your, initiative that you have with people who have less than and are wanting to move, and that you already have established in that area, would be in addition to that. That's what I'm saying, in addition to that, where they are closer rather than farther away from those open spaces, from those open parks.
Maybe I don't understand the question, because the areas that we're looking to rezone they're not raw land.
No.
None of it's raw land. All of it is areas that are already developed in parks. And parks are a permitted use. Like in the residential zone, a park is a permitted use, so it's there. We're just trying to take that park and create an open space zone for it, so that long-term, there's better protection and development regulations around that open space. It's still going to be open space regardless of whether we create this code or not. It's still going to be open space because we're not going to change them. We're not going to take out a park. We're not, going to take out a park and put in apartments. But it's owned, this land is owned by the homeowners association. Down the road, the homeowners association can do anything they want. I mean, we don't have control over what a homeowner association does 5 or 10 or 15 years from now. We're just trying to protect long-term these areas as open space areas. And we are committed to doing affordable housing in the balance of this project as it moves forward. And you're seeing more, the kind of things the legislature's been talking about this year, about allowing a duplex or a fourplex on a single family lot, and a lot of the standards that they're talking about in terms of improving affordable housing. We're already in Liberty Lake doing virtually everything that they're trying to have other people, other communities do. And Lisa talked about some of the changes you're gonna have to be making in your comp plan. And a lot of those are related to some of the statutes that have been passed related to affordable housing. Like you may have to allow a fourplex on a single family lot, if that's what the legislature says. But we already do that. We already do it in the River District.
Where are you fourplex in the River District?
Well, we have townhouses, we have 4-unit townhouses. And we're working on new product. Like we just designed a little building that looks like a single family house. And it's got 2 one-bedroom apartments upstairs and 2 one-bedroom apartments downstairs. No garage. And we'd like to build that facing the street and with an alley at the back, and have their parking be off the alley. So they have parking spaces off the alley. And that allows that to be really affordable because,
That's what I'd like to see.
yeah,
I'd like to see.
and we're designing that right now. And we're going to build that building for the first time. We're working with a small developer in East Central neighborhood. And we're gonna build that for the first time in East Central neighborhood because we're working with him. But that's a product that we want to have available in all of our communities. And so it's just a matter of, we're all the time looking for better, more affordable product that allows a wide range of economic conditions to people to live in our community. We want economic diversity, we want social diversity, and it's something that we've done in every one of the projects that we built, even in Kendall Yards, which everything's expensive now. But we started off selling townhouses that were 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and 1,000 square feet for $120,000. That's what we sold those units for. But of course, prices have gone up and costs have gone up, and they're not that price anymore. But you have to continue to look for opportunities to do small houses and higher density.
And that's, to wrap this, what I'm saying on this. Young people are going off to college from this area, Liberty Lake, and they can't come back here and move in. Okay? Executives are coming here to work, but they don't need something big, they don't need a single family dwelling. I'm saying those are the types of things, kind of affordable for those who need that affordable price, but livable for those who cannot return to the legacy their families have built here. They can't return to the legacy because there's no way back in. Once you sell now, you're done. You're out of Liberty Lake. You won't be able to afford to move back
I
in.
mean,
That was what I was.
That's part of the reason that some of those new beginning homes that we're doing, we're putting that affordability covenant on the property. So that they are permanently affordable. When they resell the house, they have to resell it. And that's what Habitat's doing, for example. Habitat is putting those covenants on and they work. And so it's a hard problem. You know, by ourselves, we're not gonna solve the whole world here on affordable housing, but I do feel like we're doing our share and we're working on it hard.
Thank you, Mr. Frank. DG, do you have anything else on that? Okay, thank you for telling us how that works for us. Any other comments?
Those are 2 separate issues, really. And I think what you're wanting to do with the updated code is simply protect what's already protected. Is that fair? And then it allows us simplicity when it comes to the neighborhood gatherings, so you can actually build a sense of community for all of those who are living within the area.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the things I have a concern about is open space has a legal definition. in the RCWs, and it has to do with property tax. So I'm a little concerned about that, putting that term into our code. I'd rather see it called something else than open space.
I mean, we're not, I don't think that,
And I get the feeling that that's not
Yeah,
set
I'd
in
be-
concrete, I just,
yeah, I'm happy to work with the staff. to see if
public
there's a better
use
name
or
for it.
something, yes.
But it's just as a, and you may already know this, but, if property is owned by a homeowners association, then, under the law, that property is exempt from property taxes. So the property that homeowners associations own, they don't have to pay property taxes on it. Because the value, what the court, and this is a court decision, that said that you own a home in River District, your home reflects the fact that those park and open spaces are there. And so to tax the park, in addition to your house, is taxing you twice. And so that was a court case. And so the property that's owned by a homeowners association is not taxed for property tax purposes.
Right, I understand that part.
Yeah.
I just don't want there to be confusion about what open space is, because it's a term up for debate quite often.
Yeah.
And so, the only other issue I have is these storage units. The ones that are out there now are ugly. They need maintenance, they need painting. It looks industrial. So I would not agree to have those put on those properties at all.
Yeah.
Just, I'll tell you up front.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's things you can do with painting, all of those, when we put them in, have brand new paint jobs on them, so. We
They're
didn't,
rusting now.
well, I'm not saying they're not, but
I
they were
understand.
all, they were all brand new painted when we put them in. And it's just there is a significant, affordability issue related to it. And there's also a significant, issue with just the size of the structures are going to be. And I've had this conversation with some of the people that live on the other side of the fence there, because they told me they don't like it, and I can say, well, the problem is, if I don't have these, then I'm gonna go in and build another building similar to the farm stand building. That's basically a little two-car garage with a roof. And we can't build that under the power line. So we have to build it, we enlarged that area by 50 feet. So there's 50 feet of land between the power line and the fence. Right. So if we were to do another building, we have to build it right on near the fence with whatever the setback is from the fence. And now you're gonna have a two-story garage. And you're gonna be looking at a two-story garage instead of what you're looking at. So there's compromises here. You have to understand what the compromises are. And we believe that what we're proposing is the best compromise.
Okay, we've got another presentation to do, so any additional comments that are short that you guys want to add to the record here?
Just one quick question, Jim, regarding timing. I mean, being a River District resident, there's a lot of property out there. Why now?
Partly because we're turning this over to the homeowners association. The residents are taking control of the homeowners association. Part of it because there's been some confusion about what uses are permitted and not permitted on open space land, on park land. Part of it has to do with some of the regulations related to events and what kind of events are permitted and not permitted and that kind of thing. So a lot of it is just clarifying a lot of that, getting the open space lands clearly identified, having clear understanding of what uses are permitted on of park and open spaces land, and what are the development regulations related to them, so it's clear. Because right now, it's governed by underlying zones that have nothing to do with open space.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Also, this stuff, we're going to go workshop this some more, so we'll have an opportunity to dive into this a little deeper, so. Okay.
On the, so there's two areas on the development, just moving on to the development regulation section now. And I'm gonna say a few words and Mike's gonna come up. there's two areas in the development code that we're looking at clarifying. One is landscaping standards, which Mike will talk about in some detail. And the other one is sign standards. And the sign standards, and this relates to something I said earlier, the city sign standards are a bit confusing in some areas, but they're also designed for suburban development. They were not designed for the kind of street-facing, walkable kind of retail that we're trying to develop in the River District. So the kind of little retail village you see on Indiana and Harvest Parkway, and the kind of small little street-facing retail that you'll see on Indiana near Harvard Road in the town center. And so that has a much more urban feel, has a much more pedestrian feel. And the kind of signs that those buildings have are quite different from the kind of signs that you'll see on a strip center, like the Albertson Strip Center or the Yoke Strip Center, as you go through Liberty Lake Drive. And so we had some difficulty with signage on some of those small buildings because the code doesn't have clear regulations on what I'll call blade signs. And blade signs are a sign that, you know, stick out from the wall. So we tried to clarify, you know, those kinds of things. We also tried to clarify the regulations around A-boards and real estate signs and temporary event signs and that kind of thing. And there's confusion about that. And so we've made the small temporary signs, whether it's a real estate sign, a political sign, a community event sign, we've made those exempt signs, which means they're exempt from permitting. There are standards related to them that we've left in, but you don't have to get a permit for every one of those signs. And the fact is, over the 15 years that we've been developing here, they never required a permit. Or the code might have said that there was a permit required for a real estate sign, for example, but no one ever gets a permit for a real estate sign. And so that's a confusing thing. And so we just want to make it clear that those signs can be, those temporary kind of signs can be put in place. They don't require that you get a permit for them. And then, and some changes to the signs, again, just to reflect the kind of signs that we want to have along a retail street frontage. And I'm gonna let Mike talk about the landscape standards.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Carroll, I'm a landscape architect, and I'm largely responsible for the River District SAP. So, Lisa, are you bringing up my presentation?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's share the screen. Sorry.
So I have to hand it to this plan commission and all the plan commissions that came before you, because your job is hard. And when we went through the process to get the River District SAP approved, it was even harder because it was a full set of development regulations and laying out the groundwork for what's in River District today. And we believe that without the River District's specific area plan and the regulations behind it, we wouldn't have been able to do what we have over in River District, and it wouldn't be the great community it's growing now. And so the question came up, why now? So one of the things of why now is that over time we identify, and as the community grows and the neighborhoods grow, we find out that there are things that just didn't quite work. Maybe we got it wrong, or we didn't do it quite as well as we should have when we first did it. And that's why there's a development code review process and changes every year so that the city can adjust their development code. And we're here to talk about adjusting the specific area plan and development regulations within that, either identifying a new zone for RDO, which the city, I'm pretty sure the city of Liberty Lake has an open space zone already. So basically what we're suggesting is within the River District specific area plan, there is an open space zone that's similar to the city's open space. And it could be, for instance, we did not include, Orchard Park because it's a city-owned property and it's always gonna be protected, but it could be zoned RDO, much like the golf courses are and things on the south side line 90. So that's just, that gives you kind of some background. So the other things that are important is when we did the SAP originally, we had a lot of conversations with city staff at the time. They said, please do not include sign regulations in your SAP. We're going to take care of the sign regulations and we're going to bring them all up to date. It hasn't happened. And that's like 12 plus years. And so that's one of the things that we've identified is that there's been things that have happened that need to be addressed. And we've learned things about sign codes and signs that are needed in more dense kind of situations like either that we've learned from Kenwood Yards and also we're learning from River District as well. So bringing us back to how we started and why we started River District, the best loved neighborhoods all have a special quality. And this, keep in mind that we developed this framework before much of River District existed. The Orchard Park didn't exist. Harvest Parkway didn't exist. There was no middle school. There was no Indiana. There was no Trutina. A sense of place that is created when the tangible elements of place are interwoven with the intangibles of family, friends, and experiences. Together, they become the social fabric of community. And so that's what you're seeing happen in River District today. The built environment is coming together with the special events that are happening and being facilitated, but we want to make sure that we don't put any impediments in the way of creating that opportunity, creating those neighborhoods. And it's always good to go back to the goals. River District is designed as a compact, complete community. Might not quite feel like that for the whole community, but if you go into Trutina and you see the development there, or right around Orchard Park, you see what the opportunity is and what the potential is. And it's all based upon starting with these goals and developing the development regulations that support these goals. River District should incorporate a mixed-use design. Again, looking at the intersection across from Orchard Park, you have a pizza, you can get food, you can get ice cream, you can get coffee. That's a specific thing that was integrated within the code for the River District SAP, so you could do that. Most communities don't allow that level of mixed use. River District streets, sidewalks, and trails will provide for multiple modes of transportation and make the community and pedestrian bicycle friendly as possible. You see that developing as the connections are being made to the Centennial Trail, trails along Indiana, and other connections. River District's Greenway corridors, which is the power line and Orchard Park are being developed. Again, when we developed this, those did not exist. So the vision set up in the SAP is being realized and we're just fine tuning. Next slide. So what we're looking at is, I'm gonna start with landscaping and I'm not gonna go into all the detail, and I would suggest what we'll probably do is, and this is what we did when we did the SAP to begin with, is take that section of the landscaping, street tree, sit down with staff and go, this is what we want to change, and this is why, because we've had lots of conversations about staff, about landscaping standards over the course of time. This is what we want to change and why, and we want to make sure that we're on the same page, because we know once this is adopted, we're going to have to be sitting across from staff going, okay, I have this landscape plan for this parking lot. This is my understanding of the code. We make sure that we have the same understanding. And so the intention is to clarify it so that both staff and developers, not only Greenstone, but other developers understand what they need to do within the landscape code and fine tuning that. Again, it's been a long process and we've identified things that we need to improve. Signage standards, Jim's talked about that and I've talked about it as well. We need a set of signage standards. And so when you look in your packet, the signage standards are based upon Liberty Lake sign standards, but they're brand new because there is no River District SAP sign standard. So you're not going to find any edits or anything. It's starting from scratch. And we can go through and talk to staff about what we did, but this is a new component of the River District SAP, because there wasn't an existing set of sign standards that were edited. So we're starting not from scratch, but we're taking Liberty Lake's current sign code and fine tuning it. And we encourage the conversation with staff because we think there's some things in our proposal for River District that could help fine tune the city's sign code going forward as well. So we're proposing changes that we believe are consistent with the vision of the River District specific area plan and the City of Liberty Lake comprehensive plan. And ideally, we start to align the River District SAP development code with the city's development code as well. So, and I can't read that from here, and I don't intend to read it all, and so I'm not going to go in full detail on each of these, but this is meant as kind of an introduction to what we're talking about in the clarification of landscaping. So one of the challenges we have is aligning kind of the design standards as understood by a landscape architect or somebody proposing how many plants are going around a parking lot with what the understanding of the staff is. And so one of the things through time, we've had a lot of conversations. In fact, over the last 6 months, we've had lots of conversations. We want to get to, we've identified some things that we believe can improve the clarification of that so that it makes it easier both for staff to review and for designers. So that's the first one. The next one is if there's existing landscaping, because we have infill in different places, if we have existing landscaping, identify that on the plan and be able to use that, credit that towards the required landscape. Then new landscaping, again, kind of talked about that, calculations of available planting areas for landscape and how we do that, we clarify that as well. Identification of existing landscaping to be included in the plan to meet landscape requirements. Some places we have an existing streetscape with street trees and lawn areas, so how we integrate that. Bonding and assurances. One of the things that right now it's a 6-month bonding. Really like it to be 9 months, and one of the reasons that we're running into that is that it's hard. Plant material has gotten very difficult to procure, and then with winter seasons and construction seasons, 9 months would be a lot easier to make that happen. Interior parking area landscaping revises the parking lot, landscape centers to better accommodate snow removal and maintenance. I think the city has gone towards that in a lot of cases, and we want to start to align that a little bit with what the city's recent landscape ordinance has been to make it so that these smaller parking lots are easier to maintain, easier to move snow around as well. And then alternative tree installation was something that was included in the SAP, which was a shade coverage requirement. And that actually not a requirement, but an alternate if somebody wanted to look at a different way to landscape the parking lot, they could use shade coverage as well. So we've adjusted those so it maybe incentivizes that a little bit more to look at what the opportunities to create shade, which is a more in the parking lot to reduce urban heat island effect. The next slide, you're there. Perimeter landscaping. And what we did here is we did a couple of things in terms of clarifying what the perimeters were to make sure that from a design standpoint, understand what the code says, and from a staff point, we have clarity of understanding. So what the perimeter landscaping is and where that is, and then perimeter is not adjacent to public rights of way. The clarification there is portions of the parking lot not adjacent to either right of way or structure. So that might be a side yard situation, things like that. So again, these are things that we're proposing that we think is important to have that conversation with staff and say, this is what we understand, this is what we'd like to change, and make sure that we're on the same page. Then perimeters of structures, what we'd like to do is change to landscape border between structures and parking areas to make that, clarify that a little bit more. The next one of the things that we found is between the RDR and the RDM, we really don't have, because of the allowed uses within those, we've got a pretty onerous buffer that's included in the River District SAP between those. It's about, I think it's 20 feet. And we want to eliminate that because really the housing and the development between the RDR and the RDM in those very specific places, just a few places, really, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. So what we don't want to do is say 20 feet, and it's like, okay, this is them and this is you. We want to integrate it so it's a fully integrated mixed-use neighborhood. So that's, we're suggesting the elimination of that requirement. Screening of mechanical equipment, just a clarification in definition of being at grade. We actually would prohibit chain link fences with slats from meeting screening requirements around mechanical equipment. We think it should be a solid fence or a CMU wall or something like that. Some minor definition changes, which I think align with the city's code, native and or adapted plant materials being required, deciduous tree sizes. One of the challenges that we've had region-wide and actually nationwide is getting trees of a size. So what we're asking, what the requirement right now is that the trees have to be 2 inches. We're asking for 1 3/4. Sometimes we get bigger, but not very often. One of the things that we have found with smaller trees, a lot of cases, is they recover and grow faster than the bigger trees that you bring in because they aren't shocked as much. But the reality is we just have had difficult times finding trees in the 2-inch or even larger. So we're looking for some flexibility there. And there's some separation between, for street trees, separation between trees and light poles, just so we don't have someone inadvertently plant a tree next to a light pole and then make it so the light doesn't illuminate the parking lot. So we've got some standards there, so it's like, okay, these are the rules. We want to make sure everybody knows what the rules are. And then street trees, and we've had a lot of conversation with staff about this, but we want to codify kind of how the street trees are identified, how many trees you get on a street. It's getting harder and harder to locate because of density, find spots for street trees. So if you look at some of the older neighborhoods, you have big wide lots, you have a driveway, and there's maybe a fire hydrant down the road, but you've got a lot of spots for trees. But when you have narrower houses and sidewalks and driveways, and then all the utilities, everything, you're running out of room for trees. And so what we're trying to do is identify ways to be clear between the designers and proposers of projects, that here we can get the trees in and understand how many trees can be located so that we're not only protecting utilities, protecting Clearview triangles, which are going to have a conversation as well, and street signs and all those things too. So we're clarifying that. One of the things that's not included in the SAP in terms of clearances is the distance from an alley, or a driveway. So you could actually plant a tree within a foot of a driveway or an alley. We want to make sure that that's standardized to 7.5 feet. So those are kinds of things that we're tweaking as well. And then the signage standards. So this is really high level. This is a really high level conversation. As you go through, you're going to see, you're not going to be able to tell what we changed from, but that's something that I think we're going to need to work with staff so we can communicate what was changed, so highlight things. And so what I've tried to do is highlight this in this PowerPoint presentation so you can go through and say, okay, these are the areas that they changed. So you don't have to go side by side looking at the city code and the river district, our proposed river district sign code, and go, okay, these are the changes. So we're trying to give you kind of a roadmap for this presentation on getting there. One of the things one of the key elements is in the prohibited signs, some clarification on those to allow additional creativity. Because what we're trying to do is especially in the commercial, mixed use commercial areas, signage really can make it fun and interesting and informative. So it gets people and helps businesses be successful as well. A-frame signs not prohibited or permitted outright. It's like one of the things you notice, there's a small commercial, development on the south side of Country Vista. This morning, as I came into work, there was an A-board sign for a jewelry store on the north side of Country Vista, trying to get people there. You can tell that they're having a tough time getting folks in because they don't front Country Vista and you can't see their signage very well. So on the Home Depot side, they put up an A-board sign, so you at least know that they're there. So we think that those opportunities, helping businesses be successful with that is a benefit to the community economically, and it's not a negative aesthetically. Basically clarifying or reducing permit requirements, no permit for any sign located within a building. If it's inside the building, that's up to the building owner. If it's mounted on the outside of the building, that should go through the permitting process. No permit for temporary construction signage, no permit for community event signage, and then temporary real estate freestanding sign standards, which is clarification of that as well. And then in the RDR and the open space zones, some clarifications and some definitions of tenant signs, wall sign dimensional standards, projecting signs, the projecting blade signs that Jim mentioned earlier, and then sign standards within the RDM and RDC. We've got clarifications and definitions for tenant signs, window signs, building projecting signs, surface mounted advertising signs, environmental art. That's a term and a component that we're bringing from our experience in Kendall Yards, where you've got a blank wall up on a building, and let's put something up there that's artistic and actually reflects the community as well. And so encouraging that kind of creativity is an important component of River District as well. Wall signs, details on how individual wall signs and multiple business signs work. And that really, that's the run through. That's the high level overview. So our expectation is that we're going to have conversations with staff to make sure that ideally we would meet with staff and we'd come to some conclusions and balance things out and come to you and say, with staff, at least for the vast majority of it, between staff and our proposal be aligned. So make your job easier. That would be the ideal. That's always our goal. So with that, I'll open myself to any questions that you might have.
One thing good is we just went through signages for the city, and we just went through landscaping. It's not a 12 years ago signage issue. In fact, we made some things at your guys' request, I believe, for the River District, the blade signs and some of the other things that got into our current signage code.
Sure.
Was done within the last few years. I'm not sure exactly what date it was, but last year. So I know we've addressed it. We've also had a good chance to work on a lot of our landscaping code for the city, that hopefully we can carry a lot of that over into the River District landscape code to make sure that some of the lake work and some of the information we got can be included in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know where we're going to end up with sign code, because we have it in the city. That maybe we adjust the whole city one and not make it River District. I don't know yet, but I guess that will be up to staff and where we go there. So.
Well, and I think that's a good conversation to have, is that maybe there's some good, hopefully we believe there's some good ideas to be found in what we're proposing, and if they can be adopted by the city, that would be awesome. So.
Does anybody have any comments or questions? We get to workshop this also. No comments or questions?
I will say that prior to our next workshop, we would really appreciate a highlighted version of the sign code indicating what is different from the citywide sign code.
Sure.
Basically, a red line version is much appreciated.
It's kind of messy because it wasn't one for one lining out or replacing. So It's not a perfect, it's not gonna be like what the landscape.
Then another thing that you could do is using the red line format, providing comments on the side to indicate how we're, but yes, it's very hard for us to compare amendments since you are already under the citywide code.
Well, we're proposing, just to be clear, we're proposing a whole brand new sign code for River District.
I understand, we'll have more conversations about the context of why we have right now one city sign code, as we move forward.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your, presentations. Yes, I think that's, the share.
Secretary's report is next.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be super brief because the hour is.
Let me just, what is the process from here now for, now that we have these presentations, what's the process for these?
So the next step in the process is we'll come back, I think we have on the calendar to bring this back for another workshop. When we bring it
So
back,
staff is gonna work with River District.
well, typically that happens before somebody submits their application. So it's kind of late in the process, but we could maybe have some conversations right now. We are very in development
Gotcha.
proposals, so we will certainly do the best that we can to meet with them. But typically, the process is we do a workshop, if there are still questions and whatnot, we may fine tune what's presented and do another workshop. We provide you with the staff report and workshop,
Yeah.
kind of the big picture before it goes to hearing. Again, because we're talking about overhauling our entire sign code next year, with the consultant, I think they've got some really good ideas in here, and I don't disagree with some of what is in here, but there are reasons why we have one sign code. Again, we talked in the beginning about the concept of constitutionality, and we do have some constitutional issues to address, no question about it, based upon recent case law and actually even based on some old case law. But the reality is that one of the things we have to, because the sign code has the potential to limit free speech, there has to be a valid justification for it. The courts have found that aesthetic standards are one, and limiting aesthetic standards of the community are one, and another one has to do with traffic safety and I mean, you think about the Vision Street, you're looking for something on the Vision Street, and you can't see the signs or the signs. That kind of clutter, it actually is distracting to drivers.
Right.
So those are the two principal reasons, and it's really important that you have the purpose statement. It's important to also realize that we are a 6 square mile city. It's hard to argue that the aesthetic standard in the River District is different from the aesthetic standard. Yes, we have old sections of town, et cetera, but the community aspires to have that mixed use community, and we're starting to see some of that development coming forward. And so I mean, we have some good conversations to have. There's some good ideas in here, and perhaps in our conversations, the applicant will consider merging at least the sign code amendments with ours and having those conversations together with the wider city discussion, because we really do need to get there. And I will say this about that, this particular sign code still perpetuates some of the constitutional issues that we have in the existing sign code. And so changing it to have to change it again next year is potentially problematic. So I share that with you. I see there's opportunities for us to work with Greenstone on these sign code amendments, and there may be some interim measures, kind of like what we did with blade signs and whatnot, that we could incorporate until we do the full code overhaul. But I respectfully suggest that it might not be in the city's best interest to have a separate sign code just for the River District. So those are some of the things we can talk about. And again, the process is that we have another workshop or two scheduled for this. We don't have a ton of time, the clock is ticking. And so, and we do have some other things that we also need to be working on. So again, we need some opportunities for some special meetings. We welcome some opportunities to talk with Greystone about some of their proposed amendments. We haven't really had that opportunity at this point. And so, but we're happy to do that.
Lisa, we get a copy of these presentations.
Yes, absolutely. I can email them out to you
Thank you.
tomorrow. And so on to the secretary's report, I'm sorry, we kind of got off on a tangent, I guess that was oh, wait. Trying to get back to. Got that. So in terms of, the secretary's report, probably the biggest thing I wanted to report to you is we do have 2 applicants for our, vacant adjunct position. It's just a matter of finding some time to schedule interviews with the mayor. Things are the current is very rapid right now in our world, and, as Kathy and Jasmine can attest to. I do want to introduce Jasmine Broker. She is our new administrative assistant. She's been diligently learning our permitting system and helping us get through the glut of building permit applications that we have been getting in anticipation of this code change. It's a little overwhelming. And so we're very grateful to have Jasmine on board. And she's been a great assistant to Kathy.
Yes, she has.
That's about all I have, unless you have some questions for me.
We need planning commission reports. Should we visit the city council office?
That's-
Are they,
That is the question. Would you like?
are they aware? Are they already aware? I mean, the big thing is,
No,
we
no,
could go through,
You approved the docket and that
the
is
docket
something
is something they
that
need
you,
to see.
yes, and so I forgot that I was
What-
gonna ask you that if you wanted to.
What meeting, what date would that,
So it would be next Tuesday,
which is?
which is, oh my goodness.
16th.
Thank you. Yes, the 16th. I don't know what today is.
I can go.
That would be
Okay.
wonderful, thank you.
And I may call you.
And I'll actually send you the doc.
Okay,
It's in your packet, but I mean, you guys approved it and so whatnot, so.
okay.
Any other commissioner reports?
Will the council already be aware of the Greenstone, or at least their request for code?
No, they're not aware of our docket at this point, because
Okay.
it's not a docket until you guys say it's a docket.
I know, but that seems like it by law has to be on the docket, so that's why.
Yes,
Yeah.
by law, it has to be on the docket.
That's why I was asking if they were. Okay, no problem.
And do we have, I saw earlier that we had Tom Solberg on.
He was still on, according to that. Okay.
Yes, Tom, do you have any comments for us, being our sole council member and citizen?
He's muted, probably thinking. Okay.
I can hear you.
Any words of wisdom for us, Mr. Solberg?
No words of wisdom, but that was an amazing meeting, and thank you all for your service.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilman.
So adjourn, get a motion to,
So moved, second.
all in favor? Aye. So,
Great.
Well, that's all right, because
So I just,
Joe historically is the guy who always moves to.
Adjourn.
So you stole his motion.
Yeah,
I just wanted clarity for my own
So the only one where,
Yeah.
so this meeting didn't happen until we approved the docket.